Elizabeth grew up in Topeka. She graduated with honors from Middlebury College, and she has a master's in Latin American history from Stanford. If you're like me, you came to know Elizabeth as a correspondent with the PBS NewsHour. She was a correspondent in the 90s and early 2000s. She received 3 Emmy nominations. She's received the Alfred I. DuPont Columbia Award, which is the broadcast equivalent of a Pulitzer. She lives in Berkeley, California with her husband Charles. They have 2 children, Sam and Jenny, and I'm really happy to say that Chuck, Charles, and Jenny are both here. So please help me welcome Elizabeth Farnsworth.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. But first of all, can you imagine having your opening act be the state balladeer? I mean, what a thrill is that? And then what? A concept of books and brew. I mean, this is heaven. This is probably the best. I've been to so many book readings in my life, and this is going to be definitely the best. I'll be the weakest part of it. So thank you, all of you, very much. I'm extremely honored to be here. Jennifer, thank you. Thank you so much for hosting me here. You've just been wonderful. And Jennifer, I'm remotely related to Jennifer and to Nancy Kassebaum. And Nancy Kassebaum's nieces, my first cousins, are here. And so we all got to be. I'd never been in Nancy's house, so it was a huge, huge pleasure that I got to do this today. And Nancy's son's here, and anyway. And I love Kansas. This book is all about Kansas. I believe that memory, when the older you get, the more you realize that the past never dies. It really becomes richer inside of you all the time. And as I speak, you'll see how much I love Kansas, I think. I want to also thank very much all of you here at, I've got the wrong, I don't have my reading glasses on. It was in here. At this wonderful Riverbank. This is just fantastic. And I specifically want to thank Lindsay and also Annie. And then working with Jennifer is Sharon Richardson, and I want to thank her. And my publisher, Thea Rademacher, has really, it's not often that you become close friends, and I think we're already close friends with the publisher. She's fun, she's really smart, and it's been wonderful to work with her. And Lynn Murphy came to help her from Arizona. I want to thank Lynn too. A shout out to my extended family. I bet at least 7 or 8 of you here, or 6 or 7 of you are my family. You already met Chuck and Jenny. My 2 first cousins, 3 first cousins are here, and that's Barbie and Mary and Ann Garvey from Wichita is here. We have a lot of relatives here. And I've got, did
Mike and Karen?
Are they here? I don't think Mike and,
so yet.
I don't think they've come. Really, to have Ann here, I see Barbie and Mary a lot because we have a lot of things we do together, and I haven't seen Ann for a while, so I'm so glad to have her here too. Thank you all for coming, and every one of you for coming. Susan was the main person to thank, of course. Thank you. I have you in here. Chuck's sister Susan Farnsworth lives in Maryland. She's sort of from the District of Columbia, and she's here with her friend Kat, who lives in Olathe. And Susan came from Maryland for this event. And it's a real treat to be in Council Grove. Last slide takes place in Kansas, and I'm going to read to you the part that's about Council Grove. And you will see that there's abolitionism is mentioned. Abolitionism was very important here in Council Grove. I know there was actually a small conflict. 20 abolitionists launched an attack on pro-slavery citizens near Council Grove, which I hadn't known until I did a little research. But Council Grove is very, I love the Flint Hills. I reported about the Land Institute in the Flint Hills on the NewsHour, and it's really a special treat to be here in Council Grove. I'm so grateful to Jennifer for inviting me here. Last Night is a mystery story about a young woman named Isabel Graham. She grew up in Potwin, an old neighborhood of Topeka some of you may know, in the 1920s and 30s. For reasons you'll discover in the book, Isabel speaks German, which she learned in Vienna. After graduating from Wellesley College, which my mother also graduated from, my mother grew up in Potwin, so you see all this history from Kansas is in the book. Isabel returns to Topeka and takes a job of interpreter for German prisoners of war at one of the U.S. Army hospitals. This one in Topeka. There are hints from the beginning of the story, as you'll see if you read the book, that Isabel suffered a crisis, perhaps in Vienna. She doesn't want to remember it, but it will come to dominate, or at least determine, much of what happens in the book. Last Light was born one day in a vision. This has happened to me before. I was typing, I have a bookcase here, and I saw on the left a young woman on a horse with a ponytail, and she's looking through a barbed wire fence at a man in a small building who is looking through a barred window. And I looked at them and I thought, who are they? And I thought, they're on prairie. And I think they're in the Flint Hills. And I've been wanting to write, I tried to write novels for 17 magazine when I was like 15, never got them published. I always wanted to write novels, short stories for 17. And I thought, who are they? And I thought, I need to know who they are, and I thought it was World War II. And I went to the Kansas Historical Society. A very nice gentleman was just here from the Kansas Historical Society here in Council Grove that introduced himself to me, and I thanked the Kansas Historical Society a lot in my talk last night, because I went to the Historical Society in Topeka and did research. And I learned, as you probably, many of you know, that thousands of Axis prisoners of war, enemy prisoners of war, German, Italian, other nationalities, were incarcerated in Kansas camps during those years. There was a camp right near here. Some of you here may have grandparents that had people work on their farms. The prisoners that were in the camps, not in the army hospitals, but in the camps, many of them were allowed to work, and they were paid working on farms. My sister had somebody she knew in Salina who liked it so much here he came back. So that did happen too. So I decided that the man through the barred window would be a prisoner of war. And the woman on the horse, first I thought she'd be a spy. I thought I'd have her spy. She'd be trained at Wellesley. A lot of young women at Wellesley went into spying and being code breakers during the war. But I decided no, she was a bit young for that. So she became an interpreter. I decided also that since my grandfather had studied advanced surgical techniques in Vienna at the beginning of the 19th century, that she would have gone with her grandfather from Potwin, where my grandfather also lived, to live in Vienna with him for a year while he studied. And that's where she learned German. And they happened to have been having a civil war in Vienna that year. Last Light moves between past and present, and the reader little by little learns about Isabel's childhood in Topeka on the prairie. She has hideouts on the prairie, and in Vienna. Her first contact with prisoners of war occurs at the very beginning of the book in a prologue. She's already graduated from Wellesley. She had a major in German, and she's living with her parents in Topeka, and she's a reporter for the Topeka Daily Capital. And this is the first reading. Early August 1943. Isabel stays in the shadows to avoid notice and wonders why the hospital train bypassed the Santa Fe station in East Topeka and stopped at the railroad crossing south of town. On the train are ill and wounded German prisoners of war. Perhaps the Army thought they'd meet protests or worse at the downtown station. The only light comes from inside the train and from lanterns carried by military police. It should be easy for Isabel to avoid notice. The Army has declared the train off limits to reporters, but her editor, disobeying the order, has sent her, the newspaper's only German-speaking reporter, to cover the first POWs to arrive for treatment at the new U.S. Army hospital west of town. When 4 ambulances arrived, soldiers from the hospital detachment grabbed litters and board Pullman cars. The transfers of the most seriously wounded or ill men is efficient. Within 15 minutes, the ambulances leave, no sirens, and head west on 21st Street. 4 city buses take their place. Ambulatory patients line up inside the cars of the train. Through windows, Isabel sees bandaged faces, arms in slings. MPs and orderlies rush to help injured men down the steps. Steam and smoke billow from the huge engine. The scene is hellish, something out of Goya or Doré, Isabel thinks. The patients make their way in lantern light to buses. Neighbors in robes and pajamas have come out of houses to watch from front porches. Someone shouts, "They're Germans!" Several rocks are thrown, but no one is hit. MPs run to protect the prisoners and drivers hurry to load their buses. Isabel slips into a line of men waiting to board. One asks loudly in German, "Where are we?" And by the way, there's a lot of German in the book, and I have a friend born and raised in Germany who did that, so if I try to read any German words, I do not. I speak good Spanish, but I speak no German, so don't make fun of me. I only do it a few times. Where are we?" he says in German. "Kansas," Isabel says. "Wo zum Teufel ist Kansas?" Where the hell is Kansas? In the center of the United States. A long way from the ocean? Yes. He says, "Damn it, verdammt." Harder to escape. The line is moving quickly. She'll be ordered to leave any minute. She asks the man in front of her, "Where'd you come from?" "Tunisia." At the beginning of the war, the first prisoners, huge numbers of them, came from Tunisia after we finally won in Africa. Tunisia via Casablanca and a hospital on Staten Island. "Where's your home?" "Regensburg." Other prisoners shout out the names of their towns. Aachen, Lübeck, Heidelberg, Linz. Isabel notes that at least one prisoner is Austrian. Before slipping away, she asks another man, "What is your illness or injury?" "Hepatitis. Your people weren't prepared for the tens of thousands of us taken prisoner in Tunisia. The filth in those camps sickened and sometimes killed us." This happened. Huge prison camps in Tunisia after the victory there. Hearing the conversation, an MP yells at Isabel to beat it. In the darkness, she runs to the newspaper's car, drives downtown to the office, and dictates her story to the night editor, who cuts out the references to Goya and Doré. It's late and Isabel's tired, but before going home, she gets permission to spend the next day at the new hospital reporting on the POWs. "All right, Joe," she tells her editor, "no German male can resist a good-looking horse." POWs who arrived in Topeka and lots of other places in the United States. Kansas had many camps. They were in fact treated, ill and injured ones. People who weren't very ill had good clinics at the camps. But the people that were injured or ill were treated at the new U.S. Army hospital in Topeka called Winter General. And they got very good treatment. They're from the U.S. in the U.S. Historical Society, there are records of how many people, and there were 1,000 prisoners treated at Winter General in Topeka. My Army hospital in this book is fictional, and it's called Buffalo Ridge because I like the name, and it's in the Flint Hills. And I moved the Flint Hills a little closer to Topeka, by the way. You can do that in fiction. And it's in the Flint Hills because I love the Flint Hills and I wanted to put them there. To create the hospital, I did research several Army hospitals, and I learned quite a bit about how things work there. But bad things happen at this Army hospital. This is a bloody book in some places. And I mean, not just because of the operating. And that did not happen at any Army hospitals that I know of. So Isabel does ride Joe, her horse, to Buffalo Ridge. And I want you to know how much this is about the past. My sister Marcia kept a horse at a pig farm when we were little. This is many, many years ago. Joe's horse is at a pig farm. So I'm imagining it because it actually happened. And I've dedicated, by the way, the book to my sister and sort of to her horse, whose name was Flag, because he shied at flags. Isabel's had this horse for a long time, but when you're meeting her now, she's older. And she goes to the pasture, she opens the rusted gate, and he comes running. I would have loved to ride Flag, but he was too spirited for me. I was too young then. He was 13 now, sleek, strong, with a reddish coat that glistened in the sun. Isabel led him back to the barn for saddling, mounted, and rode north along the creek toward town, and then west on a dirt road that took them across a limestone bridge over a creek coming out of the hills. On the bridge, Joe balked. He had never liked bridges. Isabel gently coaxed him to take the first step, and after that he kept going, breaking into an unbidden trot when his hoofs hit dirt on the other side. Isabel guided him onto an old buffalo path that led into the hills. The familiar climb pleased him. He strained at the bit, and Isabel let him go at his own fast pace. The prairie hummed in the warmth of the August sun. A buck and doe watched her from a grove of trees called red cedar in Kansas, but which Diane had discovered were Juniperus virginiana, a member of the juniper genus. A flock of orioles flew overhead. Oh, I saw at Nancy Kassebaum's the red-winged blackbirds today. I just love that too. In a little less than 2 hours, they reached the hill called Buffalo Ridge, where the Army had built a general hospital for injured and ill American soldiers and POWs. Joe stopped at the barbed wire fence that surrounded the grounds, and Isabel looked across 150 acres flattened by bulldozers and mostly stripped of wild grasses and flowers. Before her was a cantonment-style hospital with 56 single-story wards, each with a red brick veneer, set in long rows about 15 feet apart. She'd read in her newspaper that besides the wards, there were 2 adjoining surgery buildings, 4 mess halls, a laundry, gymnasium, movie theater, post office, and gas station. Across the ground, she saw military police standing watch in a guardhouse at a wide gate. Isabel began to circle the hospital from behind the wire fence. According to the newspaper, the facilities at Buffalo Ridge would have covered 80 square blocks in town, and she figured the Army chose this site on the prairie, at least partly, to save money. Through a window in a ward just inside the fence, Isabel saw patients lying amidst the lifts and pulleys of traction. A covered walkway linked some of the buildings, making it easier for those in wheelchairs to get around. Army nurses walked in small groups along a street that circled the hospital grounds. A small detachment of soldiers assigned to the hospital marched in formation further along that street. She could hear them counting cadence. Skirting the fence, she urged Joe forward and noticed a physical therapy building, basketball court, and baseball field. The hospital was a small town, she realized, almost complete unto itself. The many buildings, though substantial, felt impermanent. As if they knew they didn't belong in that place and would vanish when the war ended. Continuing to circle the grounds outside the perimeter fence, she noticed a ward set apart from others and surrounded by double razor wire. By the way, her looking through the fence is, of course, from the vision I saw. She will see the man later. 2 armed military policemen stood guard next to the only passageway through the double razor wire. Spotting a nurse within shouting distance, Isabel called to her, "Who's in that ward?" "I'm a reporter from the local paper. Are the POWs who arrived there last night confined there?" The nurse looked where Isabel was pointing. "I've heard most of them left early this morning for clinics and camps around the state," she said. "Only the sickest and most injured POWs will be treated here." Pointing to a building about 40 yards away, she advised Isabel to seek more information at hospital headquarters. "We've been ordered not to talk about the POWs," the nurse said. Continuing toward the only gate in the grounds, Isabel saw a barn. And here's where you're going to meet the guy from here. He's from Council Grove. Isabel saw a barn and wondered what it might hold. A man watching from the barn door beckoned as she drew near. "Bring that handsome beast over here," he said, limping toward the fence. He wore a cowboy hat, plaid shirts, jeans, and on one foot, a well-tooled boot. On the other foot were bandages and a soft slipper. At the fence, he pulled gloves from a pocket to spread the barbed wire and then reached through to rub Joe's ears and face. "Oh, what a beauty. I bet he won ribbons in shows. Was he a cow pony before you got him? Isabel nodded yes to both questions. The man was tall and too thin. She saw a scar coming down from under his hat along his cheek and neck. He also had scars on his left forearm. I'm Lieutenant Billy Greenwood. Who are you? He said. Isabel Graham, my editor at the Daily Capital, sent me to report on the prisoners who arrived last night. I'm on my way to headquarters. Billy Green frowned. Damn crowds, I won't take 'em riding. You've got horses in the barn? Yes, the docs here believe that horses are good for battle fatigue. He spit the words out with disdain. Battle breaks brains as well as bones, and some of us don't recover. Pointing toward the guardhouse at the entry gate to the hospital grounds, he told Isabel to meet him there. I'll talk you past the MPs, he said. Isabel does get through. She gets through to the hospital, she gets a tour, and the commander, somebody learns that she speaks German. Oh, because she says, I don't want to interview him, and she's told she can't. But he said you wouldn't be able to speak to him anyway without an interpreter. And she said, no, I speak German. And so the commander hears she speaks German and asks her to come back the next day to interpret for one of the prisoners, a recalcitrant prisoner, who had been on the train the night before. She agrees to do that, and the next day she takes a bus out and walks from hospital headquarters to the prison ward with the military policeman and chief nurse, Margaret McGrath. Here's that reading. Just inside the ward, Captain McGrath explained to Isabel that one of the prisoners, a corporal named Ernst Bauer, was adamantly refusing surgery. He speaks only German and can't understand why an operation's necessary. He's too hurt and sick to be dangerous, but watch out for the big sergeant. He's a bully, or worse. A physician in scrubs and an orderly met them inside and led them through the building, which had separate quarters for enlisted prisoners and officers. Isabel saw 2 living rooms, 2 kitchens, a joint library game room, 4 bunk rooms, 5 single bedrooms, and 3 bathrooms. The MP said that since no officers were then under treatment in the prison ward, the 8 enlisted men were using the whole building. Only 2 were there at the moment. Others were undergoing medical procedures elsewhere at Buffalo Ridge. In a single bedroom, the recalcitrant patient, Corporal Bauer, sat in a simple wooden chair. Next to him on one side was a table and on the other side a hospital bed. The table held a book with the title Isabel was too far away to read. Corporal Bauer struggled to hold himself upright in his chair. Layers of gauze encircled his head. A brace and sling obscured his left arm. He tried to stand to receive the 2 women, and failing that, nodded deeply, almost a full bow, while seated. A large man lumbered heavily into the room and came so close behind Isabel she could smell him. Glancing back, she saw a boxer's flattened nose. An enforcer, she thought, not here to help, but to control. The chief nurse asked Isabel to introduce herself to the patient, and she quickly explained in German she'd serve as his interpreter. He asked in standard High German if she was a professional. Isabel remembered from Otto's lessons, Otto's her tutor, who you'll get to know in the book, in Vienna, that among friends, German speakers might use a local dialect, but strangers often address themselves in High German. The doctor interrupted everything. Tell the patient that yesterday's x-ray reveals his humerus is not healing. The complex fracture was clumsily set, pieces of bone endanger the radial nerve. If we don't operate to clean up the damage, he'll lose full use of that arm and hand. Isabel translated the doctor's words after explaining to the patient that she was a volunteer interpreter, not a professional. When she finished, the corporal said, Liebes Fräulein, I hear Vienna in your diction, all this in German. Tell the doctor the setting of my broken arm by a poorly trained medic at the prison camp in Tunisia was a nightmare. The pain since then has been severe. I hesitate now to undergo surgery which could prolong my pain. Isabel noted that the patient had recognized her accent, which could but didn't necessarily mean he was Austrian. She translated the doctor's response. "You're weak from dysentery. You've spent many weeks suffering severe pain. I understand your reluctance. Nevertheless, you must undergo surgery or to avoid permanent damage to your radial nerve. It's my obligation to strongly urge you to do this. The pain from the operation will last a few days. Without surgery, your pain will be chronic." Suddenly, the big man behind Isabel shoved her aside and spoke harshly to Bauer. "Machen Sie es einfach," he ordered. "Just do it." In German, Bauer responded, "Understood." He tried again to stand up, but his knees buckled. The orderly eased him onto a litter. The MP took one end and the orderly the other. The large sergeant, determined to help carry the litter, started to shove the orderly aside, but the MP barked, "Stay back. You may not leave the ward." Isabel and the head nurse followed the patient and carriers out the door of the ward and across the grounds to the surgery center, which had a separate wing for POWs. A nurse in that wing said Isabel needn't stay, but should return in 2 hours. Corporal Bauer disappeared into the operating rooms. As they left the surgery center, Chief Nurse McGrath told Isabel that Bauer had spoken only a few words since arriving. Besides his broken humerus, he has infected scalp wounds and amnesia from brain damage. What caused his wounds? From what I could understand, he doesn't remember. He clearly took a severe blow to his head and arm. He also got dysentery at the camp. The Allies never planned for taking so many prisoners. You saw how thin he is. What should I do when he wakes up? Translate for him. If he's in pain, tell the nurse. Be kind, but keep your distance. We are not allowed to fraternize with POWs. Yeah, no, the Winter General Hospital was the U.S. Army hospital in Topeka. It served all the surrounding states, served about 8 surrounding states, and it was a wonderful, apparently, Army hospital. And later, you know, the Menningers took it over and trained their doctors there. And but bad things happen at this hospital, so I want to make sure nobody thinks it's Winter General. I have no evidence that anything like this happened at any Army hospitals, though some things like this happened at the camps.
Was it south of town, or was it where the music groups ended up?
No, Winter General is right where the Kansas Neurological Center is now. It's almost the same exact place, and I live just blocks from there. Yeah. Any other questions?
I was trying to follow along. I have the books. I can't wait to get the book and sort it all out.
Yeah.
But you were talking about their memories of Hitler's birthday.
Yeah.
And which characters was that?
At that moment there were 4 people in the prison ward at the Army hospital. All the Army hospitals had the ones that were treating prisoners, and there were many of them, had prison wards, and they're there, and there are 2 of them that are Nazis, and they're the ones that were at the birthday parade.
Okay, but they were not the same as.
They're not the same as the one she's finding confusing.
Okay,
She's wondering about him. He's a real mystery.
Because I thought if one of those memories was his, how did he got amnesia?
Oh yeah, it wasn't. He really does not have a lot of memory. And in fact, this would have been the way it was. You all know, not everybody that fought with the Germans, they had to fight, and not everybody was a Nazi. Some were and some weren't.
Okay, well, I was just trying to keep up.
Thank you. Thank you for asking that clarifying question. Anybody else? Yes, over. Oh, you are here. My grandniece and nephew came. Hi. Anybody else?
Why the cover?
Oh, I did forget to tell you about the cover. The cover is a beautiful, you probably all know Terry Evans Photography. She's a great prairie photographer who lived in Salina for a long time and now lives in Chicago. This is her photograph. She and I have worked together, with me as a reporter and her as a photographer. And she gave me this photograph, gave Thea and me this photograph to use. I'm very grateful to her. She'll be at the reading in Salina tomorrow. and I'll get to thank her in person. Yeah, I think I get as much comments about this book as I get about the cover as I do about anything. It's so beautiful.
It is.
Anybody else? Yes.
I heard not too long ago that the motel part of the cottage house, those outbuildings and rooms there, were what prisoners lived in.
Oh, I knew that there was a prison camp very near to here. Do you know the house she's talking about?
I know the motel, but I think, and Mark Brooks just stepped out too, Bill knows, or Bill's here, but my understanding is there was a German POW camp here in Council Grove, but it was where the fairgrounds is
Yeah.
located.
That's
And
what I
the
heard.
barracks that were there are no longer there. And I
Right.
think they tore them down. Some of the native.
I wish I could remember who told me this, because I didn't know whether.
It was near, there was one near
But I
Salina.
understood they moved barracks to the cottage house.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Oh, that's very possible.
And is there a whole stone building out there that was the
That's,
quarters or office of the camp?
Do you know Bill?
I think that's the CCC.
Yes, Bill says yes, he does think that. The stone building, right? It's there now and it won't be there for long, Bill says.
That's the one they were gonna tear down.
Yeah.
Any other
It's
questions?
amazing, isn't it, how few people, when I did this, I'd say 90% of the people I talked to didn't know that we had prisoners of war, so many in Kansas. The beautiful little chapel at KU, Danforth Chapel, German prisoner stonemasons made that chapel.
Well,
Yeah. Yes.
are you talking about St. Rose Catholic Church?
No, I don't know about that.
Okay, well, they did the vestibule out, like an addition out to the front of the church.
Can you hear the prisoners did a vestibule out at the front of the church?
Yes, and it has a historic plaque on it.
Oh, it does. Where's the church?
Spencer Street,
Oh, here in Council Grove. Oh, so they
Yes.
did that here too. That I hadn't read.
yes.
That is so interesting.
You need
Yeah,
to
and-
go by before you leave town.
Yeah. And you know, there are lots of stories. You hear such interesting stories. In Topeka, a Lutheran minister would go to the, or was he going? Oh, yeah, he would go to the, either he was going to help people at the hospital or he'd go out to Concordia to the camp. And then they together would make these beautiful, you've seen them if you've been in Germany, but they're wooden figures, beautiful wooden figures. And he became very popular with them and them with him. And those were not Nazi prisoners. Those were soldiers that had been called up. And there's a lot of interesting stories about it. And of course, she will learn more and more about the mysterious person with amnesia. And eventually she will learn who he is. And eventually something not great will happen. So I want to warn you. Yes, Anne, my cousin.
You do an audiobook of this?
Well, I don't know, Thea.
boy.
I know, Thea's worked so hard on this. I don't think so. I did an audiobook of Train Through Time,
Yes.
my memoir, and I didn't get
In your
that.
voice.
She's such
Oh,
a
thank
beautiful
you.
voice, it would be waste not to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd love to do an audiobook, but I don't think it's going to happen. Thea and I have enough work ahead of us, don't we? Just
So
selling it.
we're selling the
Yep.
books.
We have to pay for it. Anybody else? I'll be happy. I mean, I should say something about how many NewsHour fans are here. Any of you NewsHour fans? Well, thank you. You know Robin
Oh, wait,
Yeah. You know that Robin McNeil just died.
yes.
It was the McNeil-Lair NewsHour when I started, and Robin was a good friend. And of course, I love Jim, who grew up partly in Marion, as you know. And Robin was a uniquely urbane, brilliant, hilarious, sweet man. So we're all of us old timers at the NewsHour are extremely sorry that he has left us. I think they're going to have a small service for the family, and then they'll have a memorial that those of us who knew him from the NewsHour can go to. So I'm hoping to be able to see people there. But everybody was heartbroken when he died. And when Jim died too. Jim, I don't know if you all know this. Those of you who watch Jim Lair on television at all, for his holidays, he loved to come back here even alone or with Kate, his wife, and he would start in Marion or somewhere near there, and he would drive through all the prettiest parts of the Flint Hills, including here and Cottonwood Falls. And that's what he loved to do for his vacation. I mean, he just loved it. Do you know Jim's story at all? Jim's father had a bus company, and it was in Marion, and went from Marion to Wichita, and it went bankrupt. And it broke everybody's heart and changed their whole life. He went from having a business to not having a business. I'm sure some of us in this office, some of you have been through this, but he wrote a wonderful book about it called something about, what is it, the bus? I can't remember the name of it, but it's all about the bus. And when he got older, he bought himself a bus, and he would drive it around. Thank you very much for this.